We'd like to continue our journey in chapter 14 of the Gospel of Matthew as we're looking at the story of King Herod and John the Baptist. Actually, technically, even though Herod says, "I am King Herod" in the passage, he's just a tetrarch, so he's not really a king. He's just the governor, really, of a quarter of the territory. So at this point, Herod is imprisoned John the Baptist because John the Baptist has spoken out about his relationship with his wife, Herodias. And in verse 6 of chapter 14, we find this: "But at a birthday celebration for Herod," so this is his birthday party, "the daughter of Herodias performed a dance before the guests, and she delighted Herod." So there's this wonderful dance. It's a birthday party. Most presumably, the wine was flowing at the birthday party. Herod, in this weakened state, is delighting in Herodias' daughter's dance, and everything is great for him at this point. And then in verse 7, we get a little bit of a hint of the extent of his delight in the dance. So much did he delight, and he swore to give her whatever she might ask for. So this is quite a degree of being delighted. Herod makes the unusual gift of just anything, whatever you want. I mean, she could have asked for his kingdom or his tetrarchy, his quarter of the kingdom. But Herod just kind of gets it out there and says, "Whatever you want, I'll give it to you." And that's just for a dance. I mean, my goodness. So this young woman is confused. Well, what should I ask for? So naturally, we find out what happens in verse 8. She is prompted by her mother, so she goes to mom and says, "What should I ask for?" So she said, "Give me here on a platter the head of John the Baptist." So that is her request, and you can see why it would be her request, because John the Baptist has been pointing out that she is in an unlawful relationship with Herod, and that relationship should end. I'm sure Herodias was not too pleased, to say the least, that John the Baptist was pointing this out, and perhaps would have compromised her own relationship in the sense that what if at some point later on Herod took the advice of John the Baptist and said, "Oh, this relationship, I'm just going to end this relationship. It's an illegal relationship, unlawful relationship. I think it should end." And of course, as a woman, very vulnerable, she's thinking of her own security. She's thinking, what's best for me? Not thinking of the cruelty aspect, but what is in it for her. Verse 9, we get the king's reaction. The king was distressed. So the king is not happy about this. I mean, presumably, as I said, the drink was flowing, and he said something that he really shouldn't have said and went too far, and now the consequences of that become apparent to him, and he's distressed. But because of his oaths and the guests who were present, he ordered that it be given. So we can see clearly he does not want to do this, but there are two factors. He had made a public oath. His guests were there, his guests heard it. He would have been extremely embarrassed that he did not fulfill the oath, number one, and that the guests would have probably thought less of him. Here's a man who gives his word and then takes it back, doesn't fulfill it. Not a good thing. So in this awkward situation, Herod goes ahead with it. And in verse 10, we see the consequence. And he had John beheaded in prison. Verse 10. So there he is. He beheads John. And then in verse 11, his head was brought in on a platter, just as the request. and given to the girl, and the girl took it to her mother. Sure, this was not a good thing for the girl either, when you think, well, it's given to the girl gives it to the mother. I mean, certainly not a good experience for a young lady. The brutal and the unlawful character of this incident has caused some questions. People say, well, this seems very brutal, seems horrible. Did this really happen? Is this an exaggeration? Did something else happen? Josephus, however, the historian, portrays the rule of Herod as being rather savage. Herod apparently was not a gentleman in the way he executed justice, and so this could very well be in character with the rest of his actions. So it seems like a little unusual to us in its cruelty, but perhaps this actually did take place. Then in verse 12, his disciples came and took away the corpse and buried him, and they went and told Jesus. We don't have any indication in the Gospel of Matthew what exactly Jesus' reaction was to this news. Sure, it must have been very upsetting to him. His cousin was killed in this brutal way. And the disciples also, and John the Baptist, must have been very upset at this. Their leader was taken away. Interesting, at this point, you get a sense from verse 12 here that there is still this division between the followers of Jesus and the followers of John the Baptist. There's no union of the two at this point, although many of the apostles and disciples of Jesus were disciples of John the Baptist, familiar with John the Baptist, but we don't get a sense that all of those disciples went and followed Jesus. Some, it seems, did not, but they still maintained their loyalty to John the Baptist, which of course would have been understandable and normal when a leader affects you this deeply. Hard to go to another leader, even if that leader that meant so much to you is encouraging you to do so. So we have this initial scene in chapter 14, which kind of sets the stage. This is going to be a difficult road for Jesus. If that happened to his cousin, what could happen to Jesus would be, of course, the natural question that would come to your mind and the mind of certainly the disciples of Jesus. So we have in this next section the return of the 12 and the feeding of the 5,000. This is verses 13 to 21. This is interesting in that it is the only miracle of Jesus that is recorded in all four Gospels, which tells us a very, very important fact. When something is found in all four Gospels, the historical accuracy of that is emphasized even more. If it's in one of the Gospels, well, that's just that author. 2, more impressive. 3, very impressive. 4, the most impressive, obviously. So this is a very significant story that we are going to get into in this section. So you might say, well, what is the reason? Why is the story of the feeding of the 5,000 found in all four? I mean, what's the significance of it? Well, the idea would be that this miracle is seen as anticipating the Eucharist. So there is a profound connection between this miracle and the Eucharist. And that's why it is emphasized in all four Gospels. And also, it is a miracle that anticipates the final banquet in the kingdom. The idea that in the kingdom of God, what are we celebrating? We're celebrating the Eucharist. We're celebrating this banquet. We say at Mass, at the Eucharist, that the banquet, heavenly banquet, becomes present to us. We become present to it. And this miracle clues us into that final, ultimate banquet, but we will be with Jesus forever and feasting with the Lord in this banquet. So this becomes, for us, a very, very significant and important miracle, one that we were going to ponder and emphasize a lot because of its connection to us today, to our everyday life, to our celebrations of the Eucharist, and to the idea that Jesus has fed us and the importance of us acting to feed others. So it brings out as well the social dynamic involved in this great sacrament, this great miracle, the miracle of the Eucharist.